Hello everyone. Today's lesson is going to be on tambourines. Now I already have done a tambourine tutorial on YouTube, so I will put the link in the description of this video. So today we're going to be going over many types of tambourines, which I did not do in that video. We will be talking about some playing techniques as well, but just as a demonstration, not necessarily learning it, which is what that other video talked about. So I have probably 20 tambourines here. I haven't counted them. I own lots and lots of tambourines, just like I own lots and lots of other crap. But I use all of these at different times. I own a lot of different instruments because in the orchestra and in the shows I do and the studio work I do, a lot of times you have to have a lot of different sounds to match with the piece you're playing or the recording you're making and so forth. I also have several specialty instruments I'll be showing you, and also shake tambourines, so handheld tambourines like this. This right here is a Black Swamp. This is a chromium bronze tambourine, I believe. Let me look. Oh, I'm sorry, phosphor bronze. Chromium would be more silver. So I'll try to figure out if I can tell you exactly what all these are. Some are labeled, some are not. Black Swamp's been making tambourines for a really long time. I bought some of the first ones as well as the Grover tambourines. Also the Vaughncraft tambourines are really good. Those are the three big manufacturers. Also Yamaha makes them, Ludwig makes them, Meinl makes them, Pearl makes them. But for the classical percussionist, we have Vaughncraft, Black Swamp, and Grover are the main ones. And if I'm leaving anybody out, I sincerely apologize. So a tambourine is a type of frame drum. It's got a frame, like a drum, and a head. Now again, not all tambourines have heads. They're headless tambourines, which most people use for shaking, okay? And then it's got jingles. And these cutouts right here serve to rest the jingles in. There's a small rod that goes through to hold those jingles on there. So one thing you see a lot in cheap tambourines are just bad jingles. So that's important to avoid. Bad jingles give you a sound like this. This is a Pakistani tambourine. As opposed to good jingles. So you hear the liveliness, the brightness, it's much better. The heads can be made of animal skin, so calf skin, or they can be made of plastic, as in this newer Black Swamp tambourine, they're using a synthetic head, which is nice because if you're playing outside, like doing a summer pop series, you're not having to worry about head movement as you do in all calf heads. And this is a pretty decent sounding tambourine. It's not as, I would say, lively, that's a good word for it, as the calf head tambourines. And the thumb rolls can sometimes be a challenge on the synthetic heads. But it's great because you don't have to worry about the head moving all around outside and even inside. So I do use this thing quite a bit. I also will mount this one sometimes. Let's talk about that real quick. There's a hole in most tambourines, usually right here where you grip it. And that's not for putting your thumb in or anything like that. That's for putting a stand mount. And let's show you that real quick so I don't forget about it. So this is typically what I use to mount a tambourine if I want to use a headed good tambourine to mount, and so I can play it with sticks, which you can do, or mallets. So I took an old bass drum cymbal holder that I had. And these are really old, these cymbal holders. Hopefully you can see that. And it's got threads, and it's just long enough to fit inside a tambourine shell. And then I put a piece of felt, cymbal felt, on here, and then I got another washer, like a neoprene washer, plumbing washer. And what I do is I'll put that here, and then I'll put that neoprene on there, and then it's a little tricky, and then we'll swing this around in that nut and get it really tight. This won't hurt your tambourine if you use the washers, okay? It won't mark it up at all. And there you go. All right? So sometimes you have to do this if you're playing shows. It's very common. Instead of using a headless tambourine, like we've all seen, and I'll show you those later, you want something with a head. You have to do sometimes buzz rolls on there and all kinds of things. So. All right. So it really works out well. So that's something that you might want to consider getting. Okay, but the heads, the best heads are animal skin, as we were talking about. So let's talk real quick about how to change a head. I might do another video if I break one of these heads, I'll do a video on it immediately when I change the head. I don't break heads often. Sometimes my students break them if we're in a lesson by accident. It's not a big deal. Animal skin heads will break if they're too tight. You try not to do it because it's a pain in the neck, as you'll see, to change the head. So this is a replacement head that I cut out. I have a lot of old calf heads if you guys have watched my other videos. And sometimes they break, and when the bigger ones break, you can make smaller heads out of them. So that's what I did with this. This was a bass drum calf head, pretty thick, which is perfect for a tambourine head. And I cut it into a circle. So these tambourines, most of them are 10 inches. So if you have a 10-inch tambourine head, you probably want to cut at least a 13 or 14, it's a 13-inch circle, so you have enough room to get around the side once it's wet. So here's how you do this. The first thing you do, and we'll use this as a little demo. This is a cheap, again, Pakistani tambourine that you'd find at a flea market or something. So this head has been broken off. And you'll see when the head breaks off, there's some residue on there. Glue, whatnot, tacks. Some tambourines use tacks. Well, you take all those tacks out, and then you take the head off, and you can use some light sandpaper. And there's a product called Glue Gun you can also use to get some of that glue off. It takes a while. Really light sandpaper, though, maybe 300 grit, which is very fine. And just sand it lightly, get all that stuff off of there. All right, because the glue you're going to use, which will be a wood glue, will have to hold that tambourine head on there. So you'll do that, and then you'll take your head and you'll wet it, all right, for maybe 30 minutes normally. Just leave it in there. It can get really wet. And at that point, it'll be the consistency of like almost a very thick paper towel, you know, thicker, and it won't break unless you really tear it, but it'll be very wet. And you'll need 2 people for this. It's much easier, so you can use your spouse or friend or whatever. And you're going to get a rubber band. This one's perfect. Okay. Get a rubber band that's maybe, you know, I would say 10 inches long. And when it does this, it's not going to be too tight, so it's not impossible to get it around the head. And you'll put the head on there. You'll lay it out. And then you'll get that rubber band. This is the 2-person kind of operation. You'll put that rubber band on there. I'm not going to be able to do it by myself right now. Okay? And then you'll leave that head sit for, you know, maybe an hour. Now, don't put it in the sun. Don't put it in the oven. And don't do anything. Just, even if it's a humid day, just leave it sit inside and let it dry on its own. If it dries too fast, you're going to have problems with wrinkling. Now, as it's drying, you might want to take a damp towel, not too damp, just wring it out and put it over the head. So this may take several days to dry, but it's going to dry evenly then, and you won't have any issues with wrinkling, which is a big problem. All right. So remember, there'll be glue on there, and that's what's going to hold that head on. So it's tricky. And once it's on there, and if it's too loose, you can try stuff to get it drier, but it's going to be difficult. So you can use a blow dryer. Don't put it in the oven. Again, I used to do that, and then one caught on fire, so I stopped doing that. Don't use a heat gun. It's too hot. A blow dryer works fine. All right, and that can't catch on fire or do anything bad like that. All right, so and then leave it for a while. And it depends on the climate you're in and the humidity, but it could take, a day or two to get right. And then again, you can dampen it down. If you see wrinkles, dampen it down, and then it'll tighten up, and eventually it'll look like this. That's a head that I changed. That's a black swamp head. And I've had this head on there now for maybe 10 years, and the original head for 10 years before that, okay? So this is one of my favorite tambourines, so I really, really like this one. And the head came out great, no wrinkles. It's pretty much perfect. So it's very challenging to do this. It's probably going to take you a few times. Unfortunately, you'll have to have a couple heads and do a bunch of work, but eventually you'll get good at it, and then you don't have to pay someone else to do it, which can be expensive. So that's how you change tambourine head, okay? So there's several things you can do if you do have your animal skin heads that are getting loose. Again, you can try the blow dryer thing. One way I like to do it is I use an old incandescent stand light. The new LED lights won't do anything, so don't worry about those. And that's probably blinding you, and I'll just take it like this, and it has this adjustable thing that you put on the stand to hold it. And I'll take the tambourine, and I'll just do that and leave it sit. That's it. It's completely safe. It can't get too tight. And a lot of times with the orchestra, we'll keep one of these in our trap cases, one or two. And if we're playing outside or in the hall and it's in the summer and it's humid, the first thing we do when we get there is we'll put the tambourines on the stand light and just leave it. That way, when you go to play, it's ready to go, okay? So that's a good thing to remember. You can use a heating pad. Some people do that. I don't do it. It takes too long. Stand light works much better. It's much hotter, and it works probably within 10 minutes. All right? So that's a little trick you can use to do that. All right. So other things you might need when you play tambourine. Beeswax is something a lot of people use when they're doing thumb rolls. So you could take that beeswax and just run it lightly around the head, not too much. All right? Like that. And that will make your thumb rolls a little bit easier. Eventually, if you have a good head and you're used to doing thumb rolls, it's not that much of an issue. But when you first start, you might want to use some wax. If the wax buildup gets pretty bad, see if I can find one with some bad wax buildup. There's one. It's an old Grover. You see how bad that is? What you can do is heat it up with a blow dryer or a stand light, and then take a plastic butter knife, and scrape it off. All right? What else also works is a windshield scraper, like an ice scraper. So you don't want to use a butter knife, metal. It can mess up the head. So just scrape it off and it'll be fine. Now, some people polyurethane their tambourine heads. I don't do that, but that does give you some more tack, when you're going around. Other people use this kind of stuff, sandpaper. That really hurts, so I don't want to sand my thumb. All right, but that's something that that's a small one. Companies offer. You put this on your tambourine. It actually muffles it some, which is nice, but it hurts. So you don't want to do that. I guess it's my opinion. All right. So beeswax works well, or just practice a lot. Your thumb will get kind of calloused, and over time you'll be able to do this easily. Now there are different heads that give you better traction when you're playing. I'll show you a lot of these in a minute, but this is a Fema Tambourine. Their heads are, I believe they're goat skin, and they're very, very hairy. In other words, if you looked at it under a magnifying glass, or I guess a microscope, you'd see all these fine hairs. So these are amazing for thumb rolls or finger rolls. So, all right, finger roll is when you just use your finger, middle finger I use, and your thumb roll is when you just use your thumb. I mostly do thumb rolls, but plenty of people use all kinds of finger roll techniques, which is fine, whatever works for you. Okay, so I have a number of these Fema tambourines. These are big ones. These are 13 inches, and these are amazing for thumb rolls because you can play a really long one. So, and you can do big crescendos. And by the way, when you're doing a thumb roll, and you might want to watch that other video that I put up, to get louder, you increase your speed. So, as you see there. To play softer, you're basically just gliding over it. Playing soft thumb rolls is one of the hardest things you'll do, and it's nerve-wracking because you usually have to do it in a quiet part of a piece. And the end of one of the movements of Scheherazade is a perfect example. You're just going... and you just can't play that soft enough for a conductor, okay? And you've got to be ready. You'll be sitting for several minutes. You just got to get up and do it. So it takes a lot of practice. So a good head that's got some traction on it, there's no beeswax on this head at all. I don't put beeswax on any of my Fema tambourines. That's another one. You might see it's a little dirty, but that's because my thumb has been playing it. This one's deeper. It's got different jingles. These are two different ones. These are amazing tambourines. They're made in Europe, and they're expensive, but I definitely suggest having at least one. So. All right, very loud for thumb rolls. Almost sounds like a shake roll. Okay, so let's talk about some different size tambourines. So you can get tambourines many, many, many different sizes. And also rows of jingles. So let's show you first. Here's a single row Grover, all right? It's a smaller tambourine. And now this doesn't put out as much sound, but the advantage is it's very light. So as I said in my other tambourine video, you can play lefty or righty, and you have to be able to do shake rolls both ways, because if you're a righty, you're going to be doing you probably hear that pitch change. It's because the heads are all loose today. So when you play, you can actually press your thumb in and get a pitch change. That's not what you want, so that's why the heads need to be a little tighter, okay? But you do need to be able to play shake rolls with both hands. So these lighter tambourines make that a lot easier to play for a long time. And sometimes you got to do a roll for quite a long time. All right, you might have to do 4 or 5 measures, you know, at 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can get tired pretty quick. So a lighter tambourine helps. Now unfortunately, a single row tambourine does not have the amount of sound that a double row tambourine. So another trick for playing loud rolls, long rolls, might be just doing this. So you might want to stagger them. And that's why you might want to get 2 tambourines that are exactly the same. And you'll have to work to get the pitch the same. But these are 2 Grovers that are exactly the same. And I have used those for that kind of thing, for a really, really long roll. Okay? So this one's a really old German silver tambourine. You'll see I have the little moleskin on there when I played it with sticks. But and then this one is a newer one, very new. So it's a little bit different, but it's as close as you'll get because the heads are always going to be a different pitch. So again, you can tune it up to get that same pitch. Now they do change the jingles on these from time to time. Here's another older German silver tambourine. So you see there's 3 different tambourines, and because the head is different, like tuned different, right now they're all going to sound so different. I'll play them all for you. Same jingles, everything. That's one. Here's the other. And here's the third one. All right, so you'll see those last 2, like I showed you originally, those are very, very close. And I try to always keep 2 tambourines that are as close as possible. So that's my matched pair, or as close as I can get to a matched pair. All right, that might be something that you want to investigate. Here's a smaller 8-inch Grover tambourine. I really like this a lot. Sometimes parts call for small tambourine. They'll literally notate it. So not great for thumb rolls because you don't have a lot of real estate there. It's very good for stuff like because it's so light. So I've used this a lot for knee work. All right, good. So those are some Grover and Black Swamp tambourines that I've showed you so far. Now let's talk about another kind of tambourine that's fairly new. This is a Vaughn craft. These are fantastic. I think this one's called the Firebird, if I'm not mistaken. So this tambourine has all kinds of cool jingles. I hope you can see that closely. And it's fantastic for really light work. So short thumb rolls. All right. And it's very dry, so but not too dry. There used to be a tambourine, let's see if I put it out here. There it is, called a Worco tambourine. I've changed the head on this one, but this is a really old Worco tambourine. See, this was a company that made tambourines, and they were known for being very, very dry. But when you compare that to this, there's really no comparison. All right. Now, one thing you can do if you want to dry it up, you can put a piece of moleskin on the bottom of this. And several players do that. Or just use your fingers like that. Okay. Or you can hug it against your body and put it on your knee like this. So let's say you were playing Carmen. See how I brought it down there? And then you muffle it against your leg, and then you're good to go. All right? So that's a beautiful tambourine. And I got 2 of these. And they are unfortunately expensive. So these, all of them sound different, as all tambourines do. So here's the other one. And that's because of the heads. Nothing else. Everything else is exactly the same. As far as shaking goes, not great, but good. So this is a really, really good all-around tambourine. Not real loud, but if I was just going to have one, I would probably get this one first. I know some of you will say, whoa, that seems a little weird, rather than a Black Swamp or a Grover. But I think this tambourine's got everything you'd want. It's soft, so you can play really soft on it. It's very, very sensitive. Okay, and then you can also play it like this. And it doesn't have jingle residue, which is jingle residue. I know that's a strange term, but that's when the jingles keep going. Like that. Too long. And so it's much drier. And dryness in the tambourine is really good for orchestra playing. You want that. These are Fema Tambourines once again. And we'll go over a few of these just so you know what you're talking about once you spend $300 for one of these, okay? They're very expensive. So they're not for everybody. They're extremely loud. If you roll with one, I'm probably going to distort the mics, but they use much larger jingles than any other tambourine. And I'm not sure what this material is. It's some sort of silver, but it's very, very bright, okay? All right. And here's another one, exactly the same, but they do sound different. So the only ones that you'd probably be comfortable rolling on are these smaller ones because they're very heavy. And you see how that cutaway works there. All right. Some of the earlier ones, if you see these used, did not have that. And it's impossible unless you're Shaquille O'Neal and you have giant hands. You cannot play that, a shake roll on that without hurting yourself. It just doesn't work unless you grip it like that. So I'm not sure what kind of giant invented this, but they got wise and started using that cutaway. This is a really old one. This is probably 20 years old, and it's very nice. It's some sort of brass jingle. So I use it basically for thumb rolls. All right, and then like I showed you before, the big ones. These are my favorite thumb roll tambourine when I have to do a lot of that. So you can even, it's so big that you could even do this with it. All right, so. All right, so it fits right over your knee, okay? Very great. Now these, it's hard to do a shake roll with these because they're so big. But again, if you're giant, over 7 foot, that's the tambourine for you. So those are the Femas. Now let's talk about some cheaper tambourines. I know we mentioned those before. Like I said earlier, this is these are Pakistani tambourines. I know that because they say made in Pakistan on them. All right, and I find these at flea markets and pawn shops. They're very cheap. Normally the heads don't last, but a year or so. And I use these, I lend these to students so they can learn how to play shake rolls. And if the dog eats them, well, so what? It's just a cheap tambourine. So it's good to have a few of these to lend to students. I'll show you a few more. Here's a CP percussion. All right. That's a LP CP percussion. Not bad. That's a good one. All right, so you pick that up. And here's another one of these larger ones. So it's a weird head. I'm not sure what's going on with this head. All right, but got some sort of residue on it. I probably should not lick my thumb and put it on there. All right, we'll put that one away. So then I have a really interesting tambourine here. This was made by my teacher, Fred Hinger, my timpani teacher and classical percussion, orchestral percussion teacher. I got this from him probably in 1982, and it's a really interesting tambourine. It's very, very dark. But it's pretty, and it's, I don't know if you can find these anywhere used. I've not seen one. It's very crude, the way it's made. It's just kind of, looks like it was very cheap. I don't know where they got their shells. But the jingles are are very nice. It's like a dark kind of bronze or brass. So that's the hanger tambourine. Very dry. We'll muffle it. All right, so if you ever see one of those, that's worth picking up. Okay, so let's get to some percussion effects here. So, one thing you should be aware of, and I say effects, I really mean other types of tambourine instruments. So, that's a pandero. That's a Brazilian tambourine. So you'll notice the jingles are turned in like hi-hat cymbals, all right? So it's much drier. All right, so you can do stuff like... I'll do a separate video on pandero. I'm not the greatest, but I understand the basics, and I do play gigs on it sometimes. All right, so that's a pandero, and so you just need to know the difference. You're not going to shake it like this. You can do thumb rolls on it, but they tend to be more of a 16th note sound. Which is cool. So it doesn't make as much sound because the jingles don't ring as much. But you can use that to your advantage playing kind of interesting rhythms with it when gliding your thumb over it. Like that. All right? Now, they also make a pandero that you can mount on your drum set. This is the Stanton Moore version. This is very cool. Use it for some New Orleans second line stuff. So you can play with sticks. It's got a Remo head on it. So that's something you might want to consider. It's not a regular tambourine, though. It doesn't sound anything like it. It's more like a pandero. Okay? So that's that. Now, let's talk about some other effects here. So we'll try not to make too much of a mess. So, this instrument here is called a sistrum. You'll see this in orchestra parts. So it's a stick with jingles on it. All right, very ancient, and some composers will write for this. Stravinsky being one. All right. So that's how you play it. You can shake it, but it's mainly hit. It's for an older kind of sound. So that's called a sistrum. And then we have these kinds of things, which are, I call them tambourine sticks. I'm sure LP's got a better name for them. This thing got crushed here. Sorry. We'll fix it later. Anyway, you can play them. So this is like a tambourine shaker, basically. You can also use them when you're playing hand tambourine to, you know, in your other hand, so to play accents. All right, so they're very effective for that, and you won't beat up your hand too much. So I like these things. I use them quite often. Then we have stuff like this. This is an Engelhardt tambourine shaker. It's a metal shaker. This might be pretty loud. I use this a lot when I'm playing Brazilian music, samba, most notably. It's got tambourine jingles in there, several of them, 3 pairs. So this is great. Not sure he still makes it, but I really like this thing, okay? So that's made by Pete Engelhardt. And then we have these, I'm sure if you've seen Led Zeppelin, you've seen John Bonham play with one of these. They call them hat tricks or, you know, hi-hat tambourines. But anyway, you put it on your hi-hat with this screw, and then you got a tambourine. So I think in Moby Dick, the great Led Zeppelin tune, he used this. You can hear it. All right. If you play your hi-hat, you're playing the tambourine then. It's a cool effect. And here's a smaller one. I've lost some jingles on this over the years, as you can see. All right, so that's a good thing to have too. Also, I was looking for this before. This is a micro tambourine, the smallest one I have. If you're begging on the street, this is useful. It's nice and light. Won't hold that much change, but you can't really do much with it. It's too small to roll with, but sounds great with your fist. Or if you want to make someone laugh, you could take this out. All right? So that's a really small tambourine. That's probably around 6 inches. Maybe 4. All right, and the last effect I want to show you, percussion tambourine effect, is this woodblock tambourine. This is really cool. It's made by Eclipse. I don't know. I probably bought this from Barry in New York at Drummers World years ago, but I don't remember when. It's got this neat thing in here where you can change how spread out the tambourine is, so the way this beater hits this block is changed. So, all right, or play it either way or this way. And if you don't want to get that residue, you can stick that, make it go farther. All right, there's other ways to adjust it, but you're getting 2 strokes instead of 1. So that's pretty neat. Good idea. I don't think it ever caught on, but I bought one. So, all right. So those are some different tambourine percussive effects you can use. Now let's quickly talk about shake tambourines. So obviously these have been around since the beginning of pop music, and these are the ones I favor. These half moon rhythm techs. I like them. They're nice and light. They have a good balance to them. So a lot of times when you play hand tambourine, you're going to be going for quite a long time. So it cannot be too heavy or you will be sore. You can even use 2. I remember I did this show, Broadway show, Motown, the musical, which was a lot of fun. It was a great show. The percussion book was really easy. There was 2 percussionists. One was play timpani and some mallets a little bit. And the other was the conga bongo tambourine book. That's the one I chose. And it was so much fun because it's all the old Motown tunes, all the grooves. And they always use tambourines and bongos and congas on those tunes. And so they came with a bunch of Meinl tambourines. Like they traveled with like 6 of them. And I had never seen those before. This is several years ago. And they were so great, all of these tambourines. I have a lot of these, but they're at the college and we're locked out during this pandemic. So I wasn't able to bring those here for you. They're really, really, really nice. So I'd recommend those highly. Or these rhythm techs are fine. They do all sound different. Well, these sound, that one's a little bit lower. I have a red one that's at the hall, and that's a little higher. So it doesn't really matter. They all sound good, but they are all a little bit different. They mostly have the same jingles. Here's a Meinl. This one's meant to mount, but you can hear. So it's a nice quality sound. And this brings us to mounted tambourines. So these are meant to mount on your drum set. So unlike what I showed you earlier with a regular headed tambourine that you have to mount yourself, these come with mounts. Very useful for playing with drum set. And I have several of these that I use, but these Meinls are my favorite. Okay, you can also get Rhythm Tech mounted tambourines. These are great. They're built like tanks and they put out a lot of sound. Finally, we have the, I call them full moon tambourines. That was a half moon. And again, I wasn't able to bring those Meinls because they're locked up at the college. But this is one tambourine. It's really cheap, but I love it for recording. So it's just got a really nice sound. I do not know where this came from. I've had it for a really long time. I might have bought it with a bunch of other stuff from someone. But for some reason, I always use this to record in the studio, and it always sounds great. It's kind of the perfect recording tambourine. So I apologize that it doesn't have a name on it, but it's probably a old CP percussion tambourine. Probably like a cheap LP thing, I would think. All right, and then there's another one that I use a lot too. This one's kind of beaten down, but very dry. So for recording, you have to have a lot of different tambourines because it really depends on, you know, if you're playing a tune that's that tempo, or it can't get in the way of any kind of rhythm guitar or acoustic guitar or even hi-hat cymbals or ride cymbals. So if you have a large choice of what to use, you can experiment and get the best possible result sonically. Also, when you record and mix tambourines, it's good to get them away from the other things like hi-hats or shakers, so you can pan those. And we'll do a whole nother video on recording and mics and panning and stuff like that. But it's good to do that so everything's not layered right on top of each other. All right, so having a good sound palette, a good way to have lots of choices in tambourines is something that will be really valuable if you do a lot of studio work and recording. So that wraps up our tambourine seminar on equipment. Before we leave, one thing you have to have is a case. I just saw that lying down there. Tambourine cases are really important when you travel. If you don't want to spend the exorbitant amounts of money they charge for these things, go to AutoZone and buy a battery cable holder, which is a circular cloth thing just like this, and then wrap your tambourine in a towel and stick it in there, and there you go, okay? It costs you $10. These things are like $50. It's ridiculous. So all the companies make them, but always keep your all your tambourines in cases because they will get damaged, and several of mine over the years have gotten damaged when I was stupid enough not to put them in cases. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.